Hi, Eimear. How are you?
Hi. Not too bad. Not too
Good,
bad. This is
good,
really
good.
cool.
Yeah,
Travis is
yeah.
amazing to listen to.
Oh, great. Listen, thanks for joining us. And what's really weird, people don't realize this is our very first time meeting, even though we've exchanged emails, and so we're meeting in front of a full audience here. So nice to meet you. Just to let people know, when I did my previous game startup, Emer, I was introduced by our solicitor and very kindly uh, introduced herself and said hello. And we were just a mere startup back then. So thanks for that, by the way. Just the words of encouragement, even when we were starting. Um, so yeah, so Emer, I'm just going to bring up my notes here, but I was just, reading some of the things, and I was kind of going looking at music composer, conductor, writer. I was going to say, what don't you do? To start.
Well, I'm a curious person, and in that's both an action verb and an adjective. But uh, I suppose the people that I admire most are polymaths,
Mm,
and I think as a musician, as a classical musician as well, we spend so much time in a practice room by ourselves. It definitely becomes our identity. And sometimes you forget that you are a fully fledged creative person. And
yeah.
actually, music's a great discipline because you study aesthetic, you study form, you study structures, and all kinds of things. And you can translate them to pretty much everything.
Mm,
So there came a point where I said, you know what? See what your one's doing over there. I think I could take a crack at that. And then you go, well, it's not as hard as certain
uh,
other things that
yeah,
mightn't be as difficult as writing a symphony. So maybe we'll give it a crack. So
yeah,
it's more of a mindset, I suppose.
yeah. And when I was looking at it there, your career starting in Galway, going to college, and then moving to Los Angeles. It was what inspired you to make the move? Was that where you felt you would get a break in your career, or just where it was to go to start, or
Yeah, well, I was one of those, and this is my relationship with TU. I was one of those Galway kids on the train to Dublin from fourth year at 6 a.m. every Saturday to the College of Music, which then became DIT, which is now
yeah,
part of
yeah.
TU. And I did that for, I studied there for 8 years and went to Trinity to study music. But in the meantime, what was really important was I was always casting around looking for skills and to upskill. And I was lucky because the fabulous Screen Skills Ireland, who are now, they were then Screen Training Ireland, had a relationship with UCLA Extension. So
Okay.
they actually ran UCLA Extension programs in Dublin. I think it's the only place out of the side of LA that ever did that. And they brought over, like the head of music at CBS, they brought over multiple composers and technologists and orchestrators and things. And what happened was I got hired as an assistant out of my work in the class.
Oh, okay.
Um, Now, there was a lot of things that came together. It wasn't just the work in the class. I was running a concert series of, well, actually set up an orchestra in college with a classmate of mine who was also in College of Music, Gillian Saunders is her name. Um, we set up an orchestra to perform film music and classic music
Mm,
that was very influential in film. And all of those things came together, and I really was studying the film aesthetic, and it was by accident on purpose that I got my first game credit. And it was one of those typical Irish things. You're in the college bar, and one of the fourth years, and it was Dave parodied on Saturday Night Live there a couple of weeks ago for his show Celtic. You've made it when. So you're being parodied on SNL. But David was in fourth year, I was in first year, came into this college bar and said, hey, who's up for writing and recording some choral parts tomorrow? And of course we all were, and we got €40 or something for doing it. Um, and I remember somewhere in Dublin, the studio that probably doesn't exist any longer, handwriting these parts and singing on this thing for some Japanese composer was all I knew. And yeah, 6 months later, my brother calls me. He goes, "Did you work on Metal Gear Solid?" And I was like, "No." He goes, "No, I'm looking at your name on screen right now." And I was like, "It could be another no, maybe not." I was like, "Who else was there?" He read the list and went, "Oh, that day, you know." But and my second accidental one was World of Warcraft, and that was literally, we didn't know how big a deal it was to become.
Yeah.
We recorded, I was working with an orchestrator because of the Screen Skills Ireland course, and he was too busy, and he was kind of like, well, this is a video game. He was used to doing big A-list movies, and WoW was small at the time.
Yeah.
So he said, "Here, you do it."
Okay.
So I ended up, working with Jason Hayes, who's now a friend for a long time.
Yeah.
It was Jason's first orchestral score.
Oh, wow.
It was my first orchestration. Well, it wasn't my first orchestration job, but it was my first proper job, a proper credit where I had a lot of responsibility. And we recorded it in a college in Azusa in California, because the universities there have, enormous concert halls, and they had a room behind the stage that served as, well, not just served as, was a fully designed studio, purpose-built studio. We recorded there.
Wow.
And little did we know. I mean, I remember seeing the cinematic in the studio and thinking, God, this is amazing.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing, you probably, and I, many years ago, worked for a publisher who was Blizzard's publisher, and I was just looking back. I didn't realize I'd left. It was VU Games, which became eventually Activision. So I worked a lot with Blizzard. This was in the late 90s and early 90s, and sound and music and cinema. They were the first developer. Well, not the first, but the really pioneers in bringing that cinematic quality to, even though the technology was still then. And so World of Warcraft, I mean, it was such a successful game. I mean, one thing I was curious to know, when you work on even those games, when you work on the music score, is it the game designer, the creative director? How does that work actually? Or how does that work on those titles as regards producing the music? What?
Well, on an MMO, there's a massive amount of content. So there is a team involved. There's a group of composers. Then some of the composers might have orchestrators on the team. I would generally do with all the big recordings. We used to record in, we went from college in Azusa to Skywalker Ranch for our recordings, which was just stop. It was like, creative. As a creative person, if I could buy timeshare anywhere, if they sold timeshare at Skywalker Ranch, you're around a table in the evening with the guys from, there could be anyone there. There could be guys from Bad Robot. There could be the guys from Pixar. And all of us around the table eating food grown on the ranch and cycling to the scoring stage, which is in the middle of a vineyard, and the San Francisco Symphony comes to you. I was so spoiled, But yeah, it's very collaborative. My first job with them was as an orchestrator. Then I did 10 years of recording. And I did, I was a composer on Warlords of Draenor. And Draenor was a different sort of technique, because we tried this much more collaborative way of working, which was, we were given 2D images. That's my 2-year-old in the background. We were given 2D images, and we were all asked, okay, go with whichever images are really, striking a chord with you. And tell a story through the music. So this is important, because when you're working on a film, often you're talking about textures. You're trying not to foreshadow the action or make a musical comment that gives away what the character is thinking. Or there's a much more subtle dance happening there. With the exception of, say, it's different in action movies and it's different in animation to an extent. extent. You get to do more expansive themes and things like that. But you got to be careful about point of view and foreshadowing because everything's set. All the edit is set. Video games are scored in the same way for the cinematic, but after that, we get to be much more expansive. So when they say tell a story through the music, you can create this big, what we call the hero version of the piece, and that means these big expansive themes, big drum brass, really expressive harmonic language, all of that kind of thing. And then what we do is if we came up with something that worked, it would become we'd use bits of it here and there. We dissect it, we take it apart, we use a version with all the percussion and the strings, or use a version with so we take the materials apart, and then another composer might take the theme and run with it in a different direction, all this kind of stuff. But what we did was we did exploratory sessions where we went our 2D images, we wrote away from any animation, we went into the studio, we recorded some music, and that was fed to the animators and to the game designers and to everybody else. They were literally had it in headphones while they were working, and then they sent us back animatics or whatever they had going on, and we'd write something. So it became this kind of feedback loop of creativity. It was really cool. I've never done one like that before or since, and it's quite. I mean, it's quite indulgent as well. It's when you're going into a recording studio with an orchestra and you get to be exploratory. I mean, that never happened. That's just that's very indulgent, and it worked. It was scored at the Hollywood Music and Media Awards and did really, really well. So but spoiled rotten.
And you kind of slightly answered a question that I was going to pose, which was kind of, I think, for the audience, the difference between doing music for games and films. You kind of alluded to it there. I was just wondering, is there a significantly different creative process, or is it, having done both from your point of view?
Yeah. Well, the first thing that I think any composer will think, because you can, people talk about so-and-so is a video game composer, so-and-so is a film composer. It's the same language. I mean, I don't understand that at all. And composers, since, all through music history, have worked in collaborative media and will use that medium to inspire their creativity in a way that they mightn't have been inspired if left to their own devices. Like ballet, opera, plays with incidental music, all this kind of stuff. But today, games, films, VR, and TV, so on. The first thing you think as a composer, you're like, okay, game, yes, nice layout of time. Nothing is a major stress unless it's the cinematic that has to go, at the end. But whereas a film, what happens is you have pre-production, production, and post-production. And what happens is whoever goes late on their time, it eats into post-production.
Okay.
And you're always to the wall, unless, I mean, we did a beautiful Irish animated film called 2x2 Overboard. Did it at the time so well on it. It was a great experience. And it's what happens in a film when it gets to that. If it's critical, then you have to have a team of composers working on it, rather than the luxury of it all being completely, all the orchestration all the everything production you just have no choice other than to get all hands on deck. Luckily, I've been a hand on deck in one of those situations, but I haven't had any of my own projects in that kind of a state yet.
And for our audience, again, are you a gamer? Do you play games?
Well, I have to play games. I mean, well, first of all, I'm Irish. It rains a lot. We write a lot of literature. We write a lot of music, and we play a lot of games. So yeah, ours was actually in the early days definitely a Nintendo house, and then my brother went to Madden sports.
yes.
Out, I was like, that that was me. But when I saw role-playing games come back, that piqued my interest again. And then working on World of Warcraft and stuff. And I have a long relationship with The Legend of Zelda as well, which was quite a mad experience, which was fabulous. I was part of the 25th anniversary celebrations, which we did a performance at E3 at Nokia Theatre in downtown Los Angeles, and it just sparked this unbelievable fan response. And 70 concerts later,
Wow.
yeah. So that was a mad one, and we were on the stage. I was on stage with Shigeru Miyamoto, which was really cool. He mimicked me with the orchestra, and we had a laugh. He was such a zen. He was, all hell was breaking loose. All these LA producers shouting in my headphones and stuff, and he was, just taking it all in, and a totally zen person. Koji Kondo was on stage with us, who was their composer and things like that. And we recorded some of the first 3D footage of an orchestra playing for download on the 3DS.
Wow.
So that was strange. I still haven't seen the 3D version because I don't think anyone wants to see themselves in 3D.
Oh.
So lots of random mad experiences, and I've had the great privilege of performing all over the world and shaking hands with literally and actually tens of thousands of video game music fans.
Yeah. And I mean, the other one, just your performances, and I've watched some of them, just amazing. Bringing, as a composer and conductor, it's just amazing to watch. Just anybody who hasn't seen it. And I have to ask, the Academy Awards, being the first female conductor, I was going to say, what was that like? How cool is that?
It was like nothing to do with video games at all, Peter. It was great fun, actually.
Yeah.
It was really great fun. I mean, I had so many journalists before I went over asking me, "Are you going to be nervous? You're going to be nervous?" I was like, "Well, should I be? There's something that I don't know about. Did you know about?" But I have to say, I've been in the Dolby Theatre before, and a theatre is a theatre is a theatre. Any of your music people, any of your theatre people watching this, just know that the theatre feels like home. And as daunting as it looks on camera, it's theatre, and it feels like that. And for me, it just. And then I saw some of the other artists. We recorded for posterity. We recorded all of the music at Capitol Records, which is a kind of a second recording home for me as well. And I knew most of the orchestra. 15 years in Los Angeles, this was. I knew all of these people, and the music director, Ricky Minor, is also the music director for the Grammys. He's a colleague, and it was just like a party atmosphere. I was sitting in the studio, and the next thing, Diane Warren, who's one of my songwriting heroes, sits down beside me, and it was a celebration. So when we went into the theater, I was like, "Oh, phew, it just feels like a theater." But you look around, and you see the big photographs of everybody, so that the camera guys can practice their shots and everyone can see who's sitting where. I'm like, "Oh, there's them, and oh my God, there's one of me." So that was the moment of this is gas. That's kind of how I felt, was, "Oh my God, this is gas." But the orchestra and the music, what meant the world to me was when I set up that orchestra with my classmate in Trinity, and of course all of the College of Music gang were playing in it, and actually many of the same people as were in that orchestra in second year in college played on the 2x2 overboard score at Windmill. Many of them, almost all of the brass. But if you had told me that, when we were rehearsing John Williams scores, and we did some of the lesser known ones like Empire of the Sun and things like that. If you had told me that someday, someday you will conduct John Williams music for John Williams sitting in the audience, you know, I wouldn't have believed it, you know. Or inside you have the burning ambition, but there's so many factors, you know. Talent just definitely isn't enough. There's a bit of luck, and there's a huge amount of paying your dues and a huge amount of slog. All the gigs I missed out on, I could, you know, I want to create something called the almost IMDb, where everyone can put the ones that they that they missed out on, you know.
And like you hit the net, you something you mentioned there about paying your dues. I mean, again, you know, with our graduate audience and young game development audience, you know, what advice, you know, would you give to, you know, game developers from a music and audio perspective, when they've limited resources as well, out of curiosity?
Well, one of the things that's been really important for me is instinct, not just my instinct, my instinct about career people and about what I do. The other thing that's great, any audio people listening, if you don't know about GANG, the Game Audio Network Guild, please join it. They have all kinds of resources, but also they have a demo derby at GDC where they play lots of composers. They put together a panel of well-known composers to listen to up-and-comers work. Also, they have scholarships and things where if you win the scholarship, you get to go to GDC and mentored and brought around and introduced to people and things like that. But there's a lot of resources. The other one for music people is the Society of Composers and Lyricists. Now, I'm not sure if you can join that one as an Irish person, but they've so many online resources and interviews with composers and, you know, all kinds of really, really interesting things to help you upscale. Definitely, if you can, with limited resources, I mean, it's all about your ears and trusting your ears. And that was me. I mean, I was seeing people get opportunities, and I could have lost faith in myself because I wasn't getting opportunities. And then I thought, but my work is as deserving as that, or is as good as that, if not better, or is it just me? Am I, you know, and get some critical, you know, get people to listen critically to your work as well, benevolently but critically. You know, I mean, nobody needs negative criticism. Sure. People can help you with to improve without killing your spirit. You know. Sure. But look at all of the I've been to all of them. What's the one in Cologne? Gamescom. You know, that's an easy one to get to. Ryanair, God bless them, and Ryanair flights. You know, it's any of those things, but be a part of the industry. It's very much games in particular. It's very much about getting to know the industry and getting to know people. And if you're a composer and you go looking for a job in video game music and you don't know about gaming, forget it. You know, it's an insult, frankly, to go into that world and say, but I'm a genius composer. It's also a community. It's a community, you know, and people who work at the highest level in games are passionate about games.
Well, that was very interesting, just from our last speaker as well, just that even regardless of what level you're at, that passion, that it's still there. What, just as a final question, Eimear, just as regards the games industry here, you may have heard that the government are looking to bring in a tax credit which could substantially increase, and you've been a great supporter of the industry here and the animation sector. I mean, at an industry level, and with the perspective you have from seeing, publishing big studios in the States, what would your advice be to policymakers, or do you have, to policymakers or the industry here?
Thank you for asking. Wait for it. Hold on, let me get my soapbox. So A few things. One is I can tell you already that I've missed out on something because we didn't have the tax break, and it's not something just for me. Something that would have been a big account for
Okay.
Ireland
Okay.
because the tax wasn't ready, and I lost it to Germany.
Wow.
A big new company that I, the CEO, I was one of his bridesmaids and toured with him for 4 years. This kind of relationships where he's like, well, it goes to Ireland if you can make it happen, and it wasn't ready on time. Couldn't make it happen.
Okay.
So here's the other thing. In terms of one of the things that I would like to see happening is something like Screen Skills Ireland happening for video games, where you're bringing over people that are working on AAA games. I mean, one of my dear friends, Rob Keenan from Clontarf, heads up a studio in Santa Monica with creating VR experiences for Disney, for Marvel, for all the big ones. He's got 70 animators and programmers in his studio in Santa Monica. David Perry from Belfast sold 2 of his companies for something like $80 million. So I put Rob and Dave on a panel for Ireland Week in Los Angeles a couple of years ago.
Okay.
And it was the first time almost all of our major, like the Board BIA, the Discover Ireland, all of these groups were under one roof. Screen Ireland, of course. And the moderator asked, what is the industry worth to Dave Perry? And he said, well, it's always, is it really worth more than the film industry? And David says, well, these things are always exaggerated. We have to consider that people put hardware in here, but if you take away all the hardware, conservatively about 100 a year. And the moderator goes, 100, and he goes, billion. And the headline in the Sunday Business Post was, Ireland fails to, something I'm paraphrasing, fails to take part in $100 billion video game industry. We have all the skills. It plays to our strengths, creative strengths, technological strengths. It's a massive industry. We should be taking a massive bite out of it, but we can't without real business support, real investment. It's a major business. And it's almost like people think, well, playing games, that's great fun, but it's not a job. And you're like, no, it is a job. It's a massive industry. And here's what I always say, is that.
Oh, you've gone on mute there, Eimear. You're gone on mute. Yeah. No, nope, still can't hear you. It's probably the most important point you're going to make.
There you go. Yeah.
You're back now.
Here's how to make it all work. Boom. I always say to people, listen, if you want to take if you want to see how much every single person invests in this industry, think of Christmas time. The kids in your family, how much money did you spend on video games versus everything else? And it sort of can be an eye opener for people, and they go, oh my God, yeah, you're right. And this is a massive industry that we could be taking a huge bite out of, because it's in our wheelhouse, and intellectual property that's created here generates income abroad, brings it back to our island, reinvest in the industry. But we need a big investment in an infrastructure first, and for it to be treated like, the future, really. I've been to China. I've seen how their manufacturing works. It's hard to compete with, but we can compete when it comes to creativity and intellectual property.
Eimear, that's a fantastic message just to hear for the industry and policymakers, and something in the university here that we want to do further work on is to get that message, even in the games department here. So look, it's great to hear it, and the points you made, and it's fantastic having your opinion. It's outside of the country, working with major publishers, players, it really adds weight. I always think local voices aren't heard, but when somebody else says it, you know, it is listened to. So Eimear, listen, I just want to say thank you so much. That was, as a games music fan, as a gamer, look, it was just amazing to have you with us, and thanks for taking the time out. We definitely, when I visited Grange Gorman, you know, our new campus, and I bumped into, I'm just thinking of something you said, it's all new and we have to have you there. And I was bumping into somebody because it's all moving equipment in, and they were telling me there's 73 pianos moved into the building. So I was like, yeah, I was there. Wow, I thought we had a tricky job. Listen, whenever we can, we'll have to have you over to our new campus in Grange Gorman. So listen, won't take any more of your time, Eimear. Listen, thank you so much for joining us.
Bye, everybody, and good luck.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye now.